What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, and today I'd like to talk about, to rant about, to rave about the most recent Can release. Came out the last Friday of June here in 2024. This is the fifth in their series of archival concert releases, which is essentially the title of each one is Can, live in, live in wherever that happens to be. This is Live in Aston 77. This release series, prior to them releasing the first of these, I think Can put out somewhere, I don't know if it was on their website or what they did, but they solicited people to submit any recordings they had of Can from back in the day. And I think a lot of these are whatever they have come across, they've done their best to clean up, to make presentable. This is not a complete show. There is a set list circulating around for this show. And this is not complete. There's I think 3 or 4 other songs. This would be the first 4 songs on the set list I've seen floating around. I don't know if they're the first 4 songs in the show, though it kind of feels like it, especially the first one, especially with what we have in the previous releases. But if there is a complaint about this release, it's maybe on the middle, if not slightly lower end of the sound quality, I think, of these other releases. It's definitely not as clean as I think the last 2. You can hear the instruments for the most part. I think Caroli's guitar comes out pretty clearly. Schmidt's organ work those are, I think, the 2 stars. Liebesitz, sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. The drumming, of course, is always present. But I think the 2 instruments that kind of get lost on here, unfortunately, is the bass. For this, Suzuki is no longer playing bass. The bass player for Traffic, Roscoe G, is on bass. And you can hear him. The bass is present, but there are moments, especially the second track on here, 2, in German, Zwei, is essentially a vitamin C jam. And you can hear that that bass in there, but you kind of want it to have a little more punch. Kind of want it to be mixed a little higher. You kind of want it to be a little more present. And I think that's the most obvious time where the bass is just like lacking, just that punch that the bass brings. But then there are other moments where the bass comes through pretty nicely. But I would say the poor sound quality, I think, affects the bass. There are times when Caroli's really going at it or Schmidt's really going at it on organ or guitar, and like it just kind of the high end kind of just blends together, and you get this zzz, and the individual notes maybe don't pop as much as you want. You get a sense of what's happening, but you lose a little bit. It becomes a little more of a frenzied sound instead of a clear sound in some of the moments. And then probably the one thing we're probably missing out the most of, no, I'm spending a lot of time on the sound here, but the one thing we're missing most of is Suzuki's still in the band. He's just not playing bass. But what he's doing waveform radio and spec sounds, specialized sounds, I'm assuming. And during one of the tracks, particularly the third track, Dry, Eins, Zwei, Dry, is that how you say it? German 3? You can tell there's like some ambient noise coming in the back, like maybe some weird like electronic noises, and you can feel his presence. But I think in a number of the other songs, if Suzuki's doing a lot, it kind of gets lost in the mix. So if there is a complaint, it is with the sound quality and what I think is there that is just not present in the mix because everything's so blurry. Other than that, the performances are fantastic, and it's another awesome listen in this series. 4 songs, each numbered just the number of the track as they're wont to do in these releases, as they do in all these releases. 3 of the songs are not definitely, 2 of the songs are hardcore related to the source material. The third one is given. The first track is called Fizz. It's just a straight up improv. Second track on the set list I've seen, it's called Vitamin C. It's a definite Vitamin C jam. The third track, the longest, on the set list, it's called Pinch. It's tangentially related to Pinch. I would say this is the biggest stretch of the name. So there were elements where you're like, yeah, that's Pinch-esque. And then the third track, 4 on the set list, is Dizzy Dizzy. And this is like a really frantic, upbeat, kind of just crazy, crazy version of Dizzy Dizzy. But yeah, 4 tracks. The opening track, which clocks in at just under 14 minutes, feels a lot like a lot of the opening tracks from these releases. The band comes out. We get Caroli and Schmidt kind of, experimenting with ideas. Caroli's got some really cool, like stark kind of brash licks. Caroli's got some good organ work that's kind of just providing like this sort of sea of noise. And then Leibazit, sorry I'm mispronouncing this name. The drummer comes in and is kind of experimenting with a bunch of things, and then finally just settles into this like mid-tempo groove. And it's this like mid-tempo groove, which we stay with for almost the entire thing. There's parts in the middle where entropy starts to sit in and we get some random drum fills and stuff like that. And maybe we slightly change the rhythm, but for the most part, we're locked into the same groove for almost this entire 14 minutes. And that's kind of typical with a lot of the opening songs, as they kind of find their comfort zone for the night. And this 14 minutes is essentially just like Schmidt is kind of taking the lead on organ, and then Caroli comes in on guitar, and then makes way for Schmidt to come back in, and then Caroli comes back in. And it really is almost just like a keyboard guitar trade-off for the entire 14 minutes, but it's fantastic, like no complaints. Yeah, about halfway through, literally like halfway through this, right around the 6.5, 7 mark, is when things start to get crazy. And you can hear some Suzuki noises coming in, some things that don't sound like keyboard, but are not coming from the other instruments. We get some really funky energy around the 8-minute mark. Caroli on guitar is kind of leading us towards a little funkier groove. And there's the keyboards underneath Caroli's keyboards are just laying down the funk. Like the stuff Schmidt's doing on keys is just absolutely fantastic. Just kind of emphasizing the funk aspect of this. And then, yeah, it almost like the hi-hat, we're almost hitting like this hardcore disco groove, but the bass isn't kind of copying the disco groove. So there's this weird disco vibe over this weird funk vibe. Meanwhile, Caroli and Schmidt are just doing crazy things. Yeah, it is an absolutely awesome opening 14 minutes. It is absolutely fantastic. Good start to the show. Great start to the show. After that, they do the Vitamin C. It's about 9 minutes of Vitamin C. This is the one track where it almost feels like they're treading water a little bit. Like maybe they're just done with Vitamin C and they've explored all the avenues they want to explore. Nothing really happens for like the first 2.5 minutes other than setting up the Vitamin C vibe. And then Caroli kind of comes in with this like almost like chugging type hard rock chugging groove that kind of gets abandoned, but tries to maybe add a little weird funk muscle to the Vitamin C. And then really not until about the 4.5, 5-minute mark when the energy really starts to pick up. Caroli's starting to do like a pretty straightforward solo, and things are pretty interesting for like the last 4 minutes of the song. Of the 4 songs, I think 2, the sort of Vitamin C interpretation, is probably the most like, doesn't really hold a candle to a lot of the other stuff that we have on these releases. It's probably the low point of the show, but it's still fun. I mean, it's still improv. The highlight, the center of this entire show is the third piece, the one that on set list is called Pinch. Here it's just called Dry, 3 in German. This is the one that kind of sounds like your typical sort of free-form can exploration, which for the first minute or so, you're not really sure where the beat's going to go or where the rhythm's going to go. We're kind of experimenting with different textures and ideas. Finally, we kind of lock into something, kind of a funky groove that we sort of lock into. Caroli's leaning into the funk, Schmidt's leaning into the funk, with some nice space noises, but some funky space noises. And we kind of, for about the first 4.5 minutes, we're kind of just setting up the groove. Really, you have your best ensemble playing in this like first 4.5 minutes. Nobody's really soloing. Everybody's just contributing to the flavor of the piece. And it's really right around 4:20 where Caroli steps up and we get like what would call a solo, kind of takes the lead and becomes like that dominant instrument for a good 3 minutes. Around the 7.5-minute mark, Caroli stops playing. Entropy starts to seep in. Drums are going crazy for a little bit. Caroli kind of comes back in about 1.5 minutes later and starts playing again and kind of soloing again. And that kind of, everybody kind of coalesces around the Caroli energy. And that goes on for about another minute and a half. And then right around the 10.5 minute mark, we hit like what, if this was a dead set, would call like the space vibe. We don't get a full space, but we get that sort of entropy has completely happened. Things are falling apart. We're kind of looking for a way to rebuild, whether it's the drummer. Here's the part where I think the Zuke, like electronic noises, I'm assuming that's what's going on. It's either Schmidt with a more or less organy sound and more like synthetic key sound, but I think it's Suzuki dropping some weird noises. And it's pretty interesting. It's like Can's version of like a drums with a Z, which is like drums in space and kind of chaos. And we get what sounds like it's going to be like a chaotic, frantic ending, but they don't really lean into the frenzy. And we just get kind of this like normal, just kind of building up the drums slowly until it kind of comes to this rather calm, focused, wrapped up ending like 16.5 minutes after it starts. Without a doubt, the most dynamic of the jams. This is the part that is the most where it's not either Crowley or Schmidt like soloing. I think we have the most where everybody's just kind of on an even playing field, responding to each other. Still really, really good. And then this release, after, well, we're like 40 plus minutes into it, pretty good set, which is not the end of the show from set lists I've seen, is a really upbeat, skittish, kind of frantic version of Dizzy Dizzy, really funky energy by Crowley. Crowley's really like doing a lot of like chords early on to kind of get that funk groove going. A nice solo by Crowley, taking off around the 2.5 minute mark. Probably the best solo of the show. It just, Crowley's found his groove. He's found his pocket. Towards the end of the solo, there's some really good Schmidt-Crowley interplay between the organ and the guitar that's really nice. This is like a very just kind of frantic, high energy, pretty well played Dizzy Dizzy, about 8 minutes long. Yeah, really, really, really solid 4 songs. I think 1, 2, and 4 are pretty straightforward as far as like Can's version of improvisation. If you look back at the other releases, like the first one is pretty much one groove that they're all just kind of, that Crowley and Schmidt are trading. 2 is an interpolation of, or I don't think interpolation is the right word, interpretation of Vitamin C. 4 is a very tied into Dizzy Dizzy. And then the third one, I think, is the one that's most open-ended, that's most, even though Pinch is seen inside, is in set list, it's the most sort of out there, kind of, you could even give this another name and just say, yeah, there's references to Pinch. But yeah, pretty good, pretty straightforward. I would say Crowley and Schmidt are the stars. If anything's lacking, it's Suzuki's electronic contributions, and the bass could be mixed higher. But yeah, love it. Listened to it a number of times already, really enjoying it. Really enjoying Crowley's playing, really enjoying Schmidt's playing. I think this is the first show where Schmidt's really almost kind of a star in a lot of these songs. Out of the 5 releases and the other live release that's been released by them, I would rank this down at number 5. And that says less about this one, which I think is good, than compared to the others. I would maybe give this an A, where I would say a number of these other ones are S tiers or low S. This is maybe an A, maybe an A plus. If the sound was better, and I think we could hear a little more of the Suzuki and G, don't know how to pronounce his name, stuff, I think it could go up a little, just a little bit of a sonic tweak. But I enjoyed it. I'm going to listen to it again. It's going to stay in my rotation. Once again, showing off like one of the greatest jam bands ever. I mean, just absolutely fantastic stuff. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the latest Can release. Would love to know anything you have to share about this, things I might have missed out on. Yeah, anything you want to share, things I messed up on, your opinions of this. They're a fantastic, fantastic band. And I know, what's his name? The Canadian Stud Muffin, is that his name? He recently got into Can. You should check this out, buddy. It's a really good release. Paris is the best on there. Check out the Paris release if you haven't. That thing is ridiculous. But all right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. All that stuff. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do all those things. And peace. Talk to you later.